Welcome back from interesting conversation to another interesting one. Here is the panel talking about resisting the Great Resignation. Such a big thing. People are the heart of every successful business. Even companies whose core businesses operate in a digital space acknowledge this, and none more so than startups who rely on a strong core of key talents to power their continuous growth. However, recently, a troubling trend dubbed the Great Resignation has been worrying industry leaders as it threatens to disband their core team of talents who have been instrumental to their company's success. Join the session where the CEOs of established FinTech companies, Ayannah and Juris Technologies, respectively share about their strategies for attracting, recruiting, and retaining talent to drive their companies to where they are today. Our panel includes Miko Perez, founder, chairman, and CEO of Ayannah; C. Wai Hun, CEO of Juris Tech and iMoney; Ricky Tangara, co-founder of ULA; and the moderator, Adlin Yusman, managing director of Endeavor Malaysia. Can't wait to hear what everyone has to say. Enjoy the conversation.
Thank you so much. Welcome, everyone. It's good to see everybody here on a Friday afternoon for most of us. And I think it's the introduction has been done, so I wouldn't want to waste our time by introducing ourselves again. So let's just get straight into the meat of things. So the Great Resignation, it's something that we've been hearing a lot in the press. It's happening in Europe, it's happening in the US. But the question is it really happening in Asia? And that's the question we want to start with. And I'm going to pass the mic straight away to Miko, who's from the Philippines. Do you see this as a real problem in the Philippines?
Yes, it's a bit of a misnomer. I don't think it's a problem in the Philippines. In our case, we really have no trouble basically finding enough applicants to apply. So attracting talent is not a problem. The question is getting the right talent. So we can talk about that a little later, but it's not quite a resignation is the problem. It's really getting the right talent pool to basically fuel our growth. And that seems to be based on my conversations with other startup or technology founders. That seems to be a problem across the region. But I'd love to hear what Wai Hun or Ricky have to say about that as well.
So Ricky, what do you think about what Miko just said there?
Yeah, I think similarly, we don't see a lot of these problems in our case, right? But I think ULA is also a little bit of an anomaly, right? Because when we start, 3 months into it, we hit with a pandemic. So more or less, the whole setup that we do is for a hybrid already. It's like we are prepared for working from home and remote working and a mix of both. So maybe that's some factors. But I do hear some challenges from my friends in the ecosystems that are concerned about having the team coming back to office and all that. Yeah, but I don't see like massive resignations per se at the moment.
I think before we move to Wai Han, just a bit more on that, Ricky, because you're unique, right? You started almost immediately into a pandemic. And it almost started as a hybrid model to begin with. And you've got some well-known investors. So the brand of ULA is extremely strong in Indonesia and I think in ASEAN. Would you think that's the main reason why the attrition rate has not been very high in your company?
I would say more on the first part, because let's say on the investors part, it's really recent, right? So whatever happens prior to that is attributed to more on, I think, how we set up the company and provide the flexibilities and how can we really make this remote work happen, right? Because when it hits, of course, truth be told, we are nervous as well, right? What is this? This is something new. Would this be working? And at that time, there was like about 15 of us only, right? And now we grew to hundreds. Some we haven't even met face to face, honestly speaking. So then, we just need to redo work in a really new way per se, Adlin.
Thank you, Ricky. Very interesting. So Wai Han will segue nicely to this, right? So yeah, please, Wai Han, you can continue.
Okay. So basically, I think our company is slightly different because we have been around for more than 2 decades. Okay, we have around 300 staff, and we do see attrition going up we do see this great resignation is actually impacting companies in Malaysia as well, because I'm actually in some WhatsApp group with other entrepreneurs and they are actually hit by it. So it is not something that is, I would say that us in Malaysia or Southeast Asia is actually immune to. And the strange thing is that I found that even, for us, we actually have a group of leaders that has joined us for more than 10 years and they never leave. I mean, virtually never leave. But for the first time this year, we actually see people leaving. And that's not just because of the Great Resignation also is not just a push factor, it's also a pull factor. There's actually a lot of pull factors as well.
And you think, interestingly enough, because you put in a lot of effort, right, at Juris, because I know this personally well, right? You put a lot of effort to onboarding your staff. And if you look at the Great Resignation, a lot of the arguments are about how do you then give back more to the employees, give them more time with the family, allowing them to choose a hybrid model, allowing them to find the flexibility of working. And I think Juris was way ahead of looking at this from the employee perspective. Do you think now you've got to even put more, I mean, is there more effort required for you to retain talent in this kind of climate?
Actually, that's the thing is that in terms of like what we are doing, right? We are so, like you say, agile and I would say advanced because we already implemented the hybrid work model. Whereas we see a lot of our customers, it's like there's a hard coming back to work, 60%, 80% coming back to work in the location. So now we're saying that we're no longer location centric, we're more human centric. We're actually asking people what they want. And we give them the facility to come to the office. See, behind me is the office. It's the virtual background. But basically, we're a very cool office. Every time people go to the office, they say that they love the office environment. But at the same time, they after the pandemic, most of them say that they prefer to work from home. So we have already given that flexibility. So the pull factor is more like, there are other companies. Before the pandemic, I think there was quite a lot of layoffs and there's companies coming to Malaysia and all that. So now suddenly, because of all the vacancies, they actually want to pull from other companies. So that is actually the pull factor. So it's whether the people that stay with us believe in what we are doing, whether we're making an impact in the vision or not. But a lot of times, especially when they are young, they just want to try something else. And it's not going to be easy to stop people from resigning. But what you really need to look at is more like organizational development. Attracting talent, retaining talent, upskilling. I think that needs to be the mantra rather than, how long will you be staying in the company? Of course, you still need to have people that are loyal and believes and it's going to really move forward.
Thanks. I think let's zero in on that last statement, attracting and retaining talent, right? That's the most important thing. As I mentioned earlier, we'll go back to Ricky nicely, right? So you're right, when the funding came in later, but obviously now I think, would you say it's easier for you to attract talent now that the brand is a little bit more well-known, and then you're in the second year of business, not even second year yet, right? You're coming second year probably by March next year, right? If I'm getting your timelines correct. What is the retention strategy? Because most of your staff who have joined you last year, I'd assume would still be with you today.
Yeah, so I think that's definitely helpful. Like with the brands and exposures that we have, that's really helping. But I think regarding retentions, right? It really more about how we treat our team or our members, right? And like I mentioned earlier, we started this and then we get into remote working immediately because of the pandemic, right? And remote working does have its own challenges, right? Because let's say it's less personal now. When you have meetings, it's more about business, meeting after meeting. There's no breaks, and people are tired as well, right? So then we need to really take care of them, right? Because sometimes people will feel isolated and left out. So we really need to make programs that really help getting them feel closer. We open our offices as well when the pandemic start easing off, so that just people can come and meet and just work alongside and feel like, oh, this is pretty normal. It's good to see other people, right? It's good to chat, but it's not forced. They're not have to be there. While alongside we are building pretty fair, KPIs measurement process, right? Because we don't want, let's say, people that have more face time or meeting in person and those feels like they have the advantage, and those that are working remotely feels like they're not being fairly evaluated, right? So those kind of things we need to work on, uh, as well as the support systems. But I think it really is a human factors, right, that we need to take care, and how we take care of them will be what's key in, retaining them instead of the big brands. Because let's say big brands is there, but then if you're not treating them right, they will definitely move away as well.
I love what you're saying, Ricky, and I'm gonna bundle that together for Miko because it's quite unique. So being where you are in terms of in this space of having remote or hybrid working and not being able to meet people physically for many months, right? So Miko, I think you are in a space where you help people remit money to families all over, well, parts of ASEAN. So it's a very human business, right? People who traditionally don't meet people to begin with, right? The business part of it. Now, how do you then, I mean, in the space of this, I think 2 years now of the pandemic, you've done hiring for people who I assume have never stepped in the office, exactly like what Ricky said. How do you then assimilate these new candidates and new employees, and how do you create that sort of vibe where they're not feeling left out, which is exactly what Ricky said? Because there are people who built rapport over years of working with your company, who's got that sort of special click, and how do you then homogenize them?
Oh yeah, it is a challenge. It's been I haven't stepped foot in my office since April 2020. It's been over a year, and I would say 90% of our workforce, we're still a very small company. We're just 60, and I don't think we're going to hit the 100 by until maybe second quarter of next year. So, and 90% of the workforce is actually working remotely. To a certain extent, the pandemic has actually helped us because before the pandemic, I don't know whether you guys are aware of this, but there was a time that Jakarta and Manila were competing, which had the worst traffic. And I think Manila was edging out Jakarta already when it comes to traffic. So a lot of our employees, we were actually thinking of working remotely already, even before the pandemic, because a lot of our employees or our staff who were, commuting from outside of Manila would sometimes spend 3 hours commuting. So now they're very happy, especially those with kids and families. They're happy because they're working from home, and that's so in a way the pandemic has kind of forced us to really adapt this new normal when it comes to dealing remotely. Plus, of course, since we are a hybrid, sort of like a physical digital business, we work with agents on the ground. So we have a lot of people. We work with the sari store owners, like the warungs in Indonesia. So but it's also an archipelago. So really, there's really no choice but to work remotely and to use Zoom and to use Facebook. So that seems to be how it's going to be even after this pandemic is contained. The challenge for us is, I think, where Adlin, you were driving at, is how do you get that vibe or that culture to maintain, right? Because true enough, probably I would probably maybe 40% of the workforce now, our team, I've not even met personally. Before the pandemic, we would have quarterly general assemblies where we would have, free food, and sort of like we kind of introduce the new people to the rest of the group. So now that's sort of a challenge for us. We before the pandemic, we always had like what we call a summer outing. Like we go to the beach as a team. We have like games and sports and volleyball. But now we can't do that. Hopefully next year we can do that. So it is going to be a challenge for us. To be honest, we don't have the answers to that yet. But in terms of building that culture, Ricky mentioned something about KPIs. That's one thing definitely in terms of if you look at task. I think having the digital tools to measure KPIs prevents to make sure everything's fair, that work is being distributed properly, no one's getting rewarded just because of being close to management. But in terms of support and also ensuring that the culture is sort of transmitted, particularly to the new people. The average tenure in our company is still 2 years. Although we've been around a while, the management team has been around a while. I think the average tenure is probably 5 years. But if you look at the average, our tenure is probably more 2 years. So we recruit a lot of people, fresh grads, and as we were growing, we had to add more people even during the pandemic. So that's sort of something that we are still dealing with in terms of how do you create this culture that's performance based, but at the same time supportive of people. I think it also has to do with management, with the leaders, that we also have to set an example of how we want to work with others, to be balanced between task and team, etc.
Thanks. Okay, that's brilliant, Miko. Thanks. I'm gonna have an open question for the three of you. Right? I'm curious, just to add what Miko said, right? Because at the end of the day, assimilation, and I like this statement, right? You don't want to be seen to be closer to management because you're physically there. And this is where I'm gonna have an open topic, which is pretty hot, right? I was told that HR issues were, from what I've heard, right? I've not heard everybody, but the median is HR issues have been a lot less. You're not hearing a lot of HR complaints because employees don't spend time to gossip on Zoom. It's not either it's not as fun, or it's not as you don't get the juicy bits doing it online, right? So I want to see whether it's been the case. Do you see a lot of HR issues that you used to see before, or is it now new HR issues, which is related to what Ricky said, which is more towards Zoom fatigue and back-to-back meetings and encroaching into my personal life? So where do you see these HR issues? Have they been propping up at all? Have they changed? Has it gotten worse? Where does it land for you guys? Wahan, you're mute, by the way.
Yeah. I like to say something, because I'm still dwelling on the culture thing. Then I'll talk about this HR issue, because you see, a lot of times, even for us, we feel that not being physical means that culture is being compromised. But actually, if you look at it, Gartner actually did a research, right? And 70% of those people, employees that were researched, actually says that the culture, in terms of data, there was improved culture from them being hybrid. And actually, what we did is that we actually created, I think if you guys are familiar with Gather Town, it's like a metaverse. We all have avatars. So we create a replica of our office and we are there. So every time we walk past someone, we actually have our own water cooler moments where we start talking to them, or at night we go and play games, except it's actually online games and all that. So that is something that you can actually do to improve culture, So, but back to the HR question, right? I think we do a pulse survey every single month to actually ask, how do you feel? Are you inspired? Are you productive and all that? Actually, productivity and being inspired and all that actually increased from them working from home. So that's why I say for us, we measure outcome. I mean, we actually now run a lot of kick-ups, which means that you can see what everybody is doing at any time, but we don't really care. I mean, basically, you see, the problem with radical flexibility is more like where and when. So now we say where is up to you where you want to work. But when is actually even more difficult, because that's when we need to plan. When is our asynchronous work? That means that a lot of times we do work alone. Even we're sitting around with other people, we're still working alone. And when is the synchronous work? So every morning, let's say it depends on teams, we might say that at 9:30, we're going to have a Zoom call just to do our own stand-ups. So we see like exactly what you're saying, lack of like a lot of these HR complaints, because you can see there's so much flexibility. Like for me, I always say for something I want to cook, okay? So between 4:30 to 5, try not to call me. So that's how you actually assimilate your work-life balance into it, and somehow it's actually improved. I think overall, maybe lesser HR issues, except for that attrition, right? People wanting to leave.
That one I think different story I think because okay. the industry specific, right? Which we'll get to in a bit. Sorry, Ricky and Miko, you have anything to add on this?
Same with us. Actually, we have daily stand-up calls. I mean, to make up for the physical absence or the physical distance, we have daily 30-minute calls and some weekly, let's say for marketing or product, there's weekly calls. But daily, we have a stand-up call with the key team members. And we keep it at 30 minutes. We try our best to make sure that we're keeping the cadence. But at the same time, we are basically blocking. Like if you look at because I use Calendly. So I use Calendly, but I already block my calendar certain times. So since I'm working primarily from home, I want to make sure that I don't also become overproductive, because actually I've realized over the past 18 months that it's really exhausting to be on Zoom practically 12 hours a day because of so many things going on. Because it's actually so easy to set up calls now or meetings, unlike before. Like if I needed to meet someone like who's 5 kilometers away, it could eat up half of my day because of traffic. Nowadays, I can have like 10 meetings a day, but that's also very exhausting. So I block off my calendar, and I encourage people to actually make sure that they have time for to have lunch, and so we schedule our calls first thing in the morning, and after that we all do our own thing, and we do communicate a lot via of course Slack and WhatsApp. So that's one way we're managing sort of the overproductivity that that in a way Zoom is actually creating, because there's really hard. You have to create your own work-life balance, in my opinion. Yeah, so that's what I want to add in terms. But the big problem, really, I think, which is a meta problem, at least for all companies now, the entire planet is going through some kind of digital transformation. Whether you're in FMCG, whether you're in financial services, whether you're in manufacturing, etc. All these companies are trying to digitally transform, and the pandemic basically just accelerated that transition, so that the war for talent is, even if we actually offer above market rates, because as a startup, that's how we compete with the bigger guys. But even then, it's really just hard to find really good talent. So we're literally talking to people in Eastern Europe, India, Bangladesh, just to in order to fuel the growth, you need good engineers. I actually like working in Indonesia because the talent pool is actually deeper there than here. I mean, just population wise. Yeah, so those are the things that we're dealing with. It's not so much. It's finding the right talent and retaining them is a little easier. I think FinTech in particular, we're kind of been lucky because we're sort of like the if you look at all the deals that have been funded, it's mostly FinTech deals, right? Or e-commerce or B2B e-commerce in the case of ULA. But so in that sense, we're actually favored. So a lot of former bank employees are looking to get out of the physical banking and then moving to FinTech. So that's not a problem. So, but the problem is they're not really fully digital. At least their mindset's not digitized. So they also have to go through their own personal digital transformation. And it's a challenge, but I think that's what everyone has to go through.
I'm going to take what you said, Miko, and relay it back to Ricky in terms of the talent war. And you say Indonesia is a lot bigger in a sense, but I think Indonesia, I also think since there's so many more startups there with a lot of funding, I would say mega war chest over there. Are you in the space where you think talents are currently reaching the zenith, where either you're overpaying or you're coming very close to not being able to pay what they're asking for anymore? And I think there's also a balance between how much you pay, and on top of that, with this whole Great Resignation, thing going on, it's what you pay as well as additional perks on top. So how do you manage that in Indonesia?
Yeah, sure. I think like Miko said, right? I think it's fairly universal as well to us that now the landscape has been very, very different, right? With all of these remote working options, your competitions is not just even the local companies, right? You're even fighting against startups overseas, especially in the regions, right? Like because technically they can remote work from anywhere, and like Southeast Asia doesn't have that kind of time difference, not really that big, so it still works. So we need to really think of how can we attract these talents beyond just perks as well, right? So we don't really focus on just give as much as salaries as possible, because I think that's the easiest way to lose your talents as well, because they're so money oriented, and so the next startups that offers them more, they will just jump in, right? Like so I would say it's not really a sustainable strategy, especially and also it's not good for the ecosystems, right? Because everybody's trying to do that, and then so you're overpaying a lot of your team, right? So I think it's more on focusing of what communicating what is it that we're doing, what's our visions, and then the culture itself. I think it's super important. So when they join in and they see what we are trying to do, the impact that we're trying to do, and then how we give them freedom, but also accountability, and we treat them fairly. I think that's what really matters, Adeline. But in our case, it's also like going back to the HR problem, right? I think in terms of gossiping, people will gossip anywhere they want, right? Even over WhatsApp. So I think that will still be there, but I think the problems have shifted as well. So in our case, one example is that we don't have all of our team remote working, right? There are functions that, since it's e-commerce, let's say operations wise, people on the ground, they cannot do remote work. The boxes, the items not gonna move themselves. But how can we create a policy that is fair for everybody? They don't feel like, oh, because I'm doing operations, I'm left behind. I cannot do remote work. I cannot be with my family. How can we treat them better as well? We are still learning, of course. It's not perfect, but those kind of issues are new in this world, right? It doesn't happen before, so the HR problems really shifted into all of this. Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you started, Ricky, especially for you, right, in the midst of the pandemic, and most of your staff, which as you mentioned earlier, is people you've not physically met before. When the time comes for us, and this is for all of you to answer, right? When the time comes for people to move somewhere or other, yes, hybrid's still there, but some manner of physical office, because as you said, some of the guys just have to be physical, right? What are the things you're seeing to draw the days of, I would think, of fancy office spaces in really, really good locations with free lunches? Do you think those days are over?
I have an opinion about that. We used to have our office in Jakarta, and we work in the Noble House. Maybe Ricky knows where that is. Really fancy, free beer at 5 p.m. or something. Then since because of the pandemic, everyone had to basically disperse. So now the guys are in Bali. Sometimes I feel bad because when I talk to them, they're in Bali working, getting work done, but they're hanging out in a nice resort in Jimbaran. And I go, oh my gosh. So I think so what's going to happen for us is I anticipate we'll have clusters. We'll have maybe a little office, lower rent because we're not in a CBD, maybe in a nice area in another city in north of Manila, another island. We're also thinking of putting up a small office in El Nido in Palawan, which is another beautiful place. It's like Raja Ampat, something like that. So yeah, that's our plan, is to have little clusters where they can still work, but it's closer to where they live, so they don't have to commute in, because Manila is really too congested. Yeah, so those are the things we're trying to do. One thing I've learned though, at least when it comes to the talent, the tech talent, the developers and the product managers are the ones these are the pink unicorns. It's very hard to find in the Philippines. So that's what we have to. So and I find that in the talent war, what we find is that we attract a certain type of talent. That it doesn't matter anymore how much you pay them. Everything's kind of paripasu or at parity, all things being equal. But they find that they like authorship of what they're doing. So if you have someone who's been bored working for Accenture, integrating Oracle or SAP for the past 3-4 years, and they do something cool where they have authorship, those are the talent that we find. So our engineers typically, actually, many of them try out working for these big software houses, doing digital transformation work for big companies, but they come back to us. They said, I feel like I'm just a one cog in a machine. Where some of them say that some of the big IT software houses, they just get a job order online on their terminal. They fix a couple of lines of code and then they send it to QA. Then after that, they said, you know what? This is really not what I signed up for. So here they got tool. They have ownership of the product, like from the very beginning, from designing it to putting it to production. And these are the type of engineers we like, because they're creative. they have ownership of the product rather than they're just another cog in the machine and just basically dealing with the tickets, right? Trouble tickets and stuff. Yeah.
Ryan, you anything to add on this?
No, I think you talk about the physical location, right? You see, we actually have 3.5 stories of my office. And now we're wondering, what do we do in the office with this hybrid environment? So we told them that, okay, guys, you can come back to the office. Only 10 people turn up. This is what I'm trying to say. So but you see, the big question is that whether do we sell the office space? I think that a lot of things are seasonal. So we still need to have a wait and see attitude, because you know why? Now my kids are going back to school, physical, and I'm like alone. And then I see that everyone is always asking me, should we go out for lunch? Don't you want to meet and all that? So I'm not sure whether 6 months later, people will say that, hey, working from home is not as sexy. We still need to go back to office like 2 days a week, go for lunches, go and really play pool instead of online games. So I think we still need to wait and see.
That's the thing, right? For a company, if you've owned the property, it's great. But the ones who are leasing, those are the ones you got to ask a question. Do you hold on to that lease? Do you then continue to expand on a physical? Or do you give them allowances then to basically work from anywhere? I mean, where do you land on this? I mean, you've got to make a decision, right? It's a capex expenditure versus an opex expenditure. I see Ricky nodding away. So you have something to add to this?
Yeah, I think in our case, I think we still provide the working space needed. Adeline, I mean, there are options nowadays, right? Thankfully, that you don't have to buy the offices. I mean, there are co-workings and all that flexible options. So we still have our offices. It's just not as big, because I think that, like something that Wai Hun said, right? It's sometimes there are the advantages of meeting someone in person, working on a whiteboard in the office, right? I really enjoy that as well. So sometimes it just cannot be replaced with working offline. And these are the things that the people will also appreciate, right? Because when they come from time to time, let's say like once a week, and meet their friends, and they can brainstorm, and these are not just working actually, right? This is kind of like bonding sessions as well with them, right? They feel like closer, they feel more touched. So I think beyond just the perks of what the office look like or free lunch, those are the things that matters to them. But on the other side, we need to make sure as well, right, that they are safe. I think that's one of the things that they value. So for example, during this COVID time, before when there were spikes, people are worrying about not just about them, but also about their families, right? Like hospitals are fully occupied, etc. So we are trying to do some programs with joint programs with other startups to help our team as well, for example, to give them assurance, right? Partner up with medical solutions. We're even investing ourselves in some equipments to help mitigate during emergencies. If someone's sick, we are sending them medicines and the kit and everything to help. So anything we can do, they kind of appreciate that more than just fancy perks per se right now, because they know you're taking care of them.
And we're gonna harp on that. Sorry, Miko, if this is the interesting part, right? So I think moving forward, there's a lot more focus on beyond just the core medical stuff that you can claim at a clinic. There's a lot of conversation, murmurs going around mental health. And I think before this, the mental health scenario was something that, hey, if you've got a problem, solve it. These days, everyone's coming into this in a very concerted fashion, where I don't know, because it's the Zoom fatigue. I don't know if it's because the fact that we're having very little human interaction, or at least we have been having that for the past 2 years. Where is your focus in terms of mental health? Because, and I'll add a little bit of a fire starter to this question. The fact that I think, as what Miko mentioned, there's 12-hour days now, right? And potentially even beyond your workday, because WhatsApp is constant and Zoom calls are back to back with no breaks potentially. So where's this mental health in that whole conversation with your companies and your staff?
Yeah, I sorry if I jump in first, but
Please.
yeah. Yeah, I think I agree with Nico. The day seems longer, right, nowadays, and it's more like there's no, the lines between your personal and work kind of blurs out, right? Because you're working and living in the same place. The lines between families and works, it's all murky, right? But then I think mental health issues, we did not communicate it enough, right? I mean, our society, at least in Indonesia, right? Previously, people look at it as, let's say, if you're, the mentality is kind of like, oh, you need to be strong, you need to face this, etc., right? So I think we are trying to communicate this with our team as well. Hey, it's okay. It doesn't mean that you're there's something wrong with you. Everybody needs help. Everybody needs support, right? And we are trying to raise this awareness as well with our team. We even have partnerships with, like psychologists to help our teams that are struggling, because we never know what's going on at home as well, right? Like what's their struggles at home. Sometimes they might not want to share with you, and these psychologists are practically kind of like a neutral party that can be safe as well and give them good advices as well, right? So we are trying to do those kind of programs, apart from, of course, the normal kind of like body support that everybody can reach out, the safe environments, and their supervisor or managers, if they need a break, we create some kind of additional time off or special time offs that people can take, apart from the annual leaves and stuff.
I think that's brilliant, but I think we're right up on time. As you can see, we're on 000, so we have to behave. There are other speakers who I suppose will come in. Would love to have heard from both Miko and Waihan on this, because the mental health part is something that I think a lot of people are curious to find out. But thank you
We
so
don't
much
have
for your
right?
time.
We don't have time.
No, I don't think so, Waihan.
Okay.
We're gonna do our own panel separately, I suppose.
Okay, no problem, no problems. Yes.
So thank you so much,
Mm.
Waihan. Thank you, Waihan. Thank you, Ricky, Miko, for your time. It was a brilliant conversation. I hope the people who listened on took some nuggets of wisdom from here. And thanks, I guess, WD, for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much to Adlin, Ricky, Waihun, and Nico. And seriously, that is one topic that everyone should be aware of, and that's the mental health. Doesn't matter whether it's in a personal space, but even more so in the workforce area, because that's where it all starts, right? Right here, and see how you can get people to stay on. If they're internally okay, everything is culturally okay with your business. Okay, we're going to be coming right back with our break. Sorry, we're going to go into our lunch break now. So do come back in an hour's time, and that is where we're going to have our Startup Disruptor Arena batch number 3 and our final this session. We'll be right back after the break.